Well, welcome, Jade. Thank you again for being here on the podcast. Glad to have you here.
Good morning. Glad to be here.
So, Jade, I always like to get started by having you just tell us a bit more about yourself. We could look at your LinkedIn profile and see those details, but we're getting beyond the resume and getting to know Jade as a person. So, if you would, tell us a few things about yourself.
Well, Colorado native, Ben. Actually born and raised here in Colorado Springs. Been part of the community my entire life. So the roots run very deep in with this area. I have always had a passion for people, but have also had the privilege prior to going into HR to working into the medical industry. Also worked in accounting as well. And I've had just a beautiful journey with employers in Colorado Springs, really watching the city grow. And watching people come in and really seeing how broad and expansive the world can be. It's really kind of helped pave a really strong journey for me towards HR.
Awesome. And I love that you have that varied experience with the accounting and medical field and then HR in general. So that'll be very good for what we're going to talk about today of how has mental health impacted you?
I'd say at a number of different levels. I'll start first with just as an HR practitioner. The world in general last year went through a radical shift on a lot of different levels. And I think for most humans, including myself, that impacted us both mentally and physically. So I have always seen the value in my life with mental health and good mental health awareness. And I think given the last year, it was highlighted even more. People's lives changed significantly from, furloughs, maybe a layoff, a change of employment, family situations, loss of loved ones. Any number of those events in themselves are major life events that can affect us on a mental level. So I think that's a huge piece there. Prior to that, again, I just have always been an individual who's been on a journey to really try to be as self-aware as possible. And mental health plays a huge component in self-awareness and really being able to guide and steer the ship, really helping yourself understand what are you feeling, how are you interacting with others. Good self-awareness, which is tied to good mental health, are huge keys in that.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that you brought up the fact that, over the last year and a half specifically, everybody has experienced this big change and had their mental health affected. But the thing is, it's interesting, so interesting about us as humans. We can talk about it and say, yes, that happened, but to be self-aware, of ourselves and say, okay, I have been affected this way. Sometimes we find it harder to talk about that, about ourselves, right? We say, oh, it's easy to say, oh, everybody else is affected. And yes, it's stressful out there. And yes, work is stressful. But to admit that we ourselves are struggling with something or that we've been affected in our mental health, I see that as less talked about. Do you see that as well?
I agree. I think oftentimes people take the position of helping others, especially in HR, and not looking at our own mental health and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a great article recently that talked about the value in psychological trust with speaking human to human. In order to speak human to human, you have to be able to recognize and identify the fact that you have your own struggles as well. If you come from a position where you are sharing to another individual that they are the only ones with challenges, often people won't be vulnerable and they won't open up on the same level.
Yes, I agree. I've been talking to a number of HR professionals lately, and the subject of, hey, we can put on our list of benefits that we have an EAP, for example, and good luck here. I'll hand out the piece of paper. I'll send out the email and say, yes, our company covers mental health. But if the HR professional and the executives don't admit that they experience mental health or that it's safe to talk about mental health or that mental health is real for them, then it's going to stay just a bullet point on that list of benefits, right?
I agree. The other part too, and I did this in a number of different organizations as an HR practitioner, test out your own EAP. Call.
Mm-hmm.
Check the quality and the level of the services that are provided. Oftentimes, just like you said, you hand out a flyer and you look at it like, okay, and it's an excellent tool and resource. It's very underutilized, unfortunately. I hope that some of that has changed during the pandemic, but check your services out. It's a good way for you to vet too if your EAP is providing the level of resources that your company expects that they are. Sometimes there's a disconnect between what you see on a flyer and what's actually being provided by that organization. So it's a good quality check for you internally. And it's another way too, again, to get your leaders, as you mentioned, involved. The services that we offer to our employees, are they up to par with what we would want for ourselves? And also, are we promoting these services as something that really should be utilized? Are we indicating that everyone is struggling with something? And are we helping lead employees to good things that can help?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and by testing those things, not only the points that you just made, but we could find out more about our own mental health, just become more self-aware. And then to that point, we can say, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that I was going through this, or I didn't realize how much this helped me. And then we can be more of an ambassador for all these options and resources than just saying, well, to your point where you said, well, you guys have problems and I'm going to provide a solution and good luck, right?
Yeah, I agree. And don't even limit it there. Multiple carriers have different apps now. Happify. There are so many different apps, Calm, other ones that are being provided by medical carriers now, because they realize that mental health resources have to be expanded farther than where they've been previously. I've had experience with the Happify app, and there's other ones that are out there. The market is starting to really see an uptake with mental health resources. So don't limit yourself to one vendor or one particular path. Remember, our employees are different. We're different as people. Find what works for you.
Mm-hmm. And a thought that comes to my mind, I'm glad that you're bringing up some of these specifics, and we'll probably get back to this idea of what are some specific examples of things that companies can try. But I wanted to address the subject of sometimes, according to what we're talking about, right? If we just take the standpoint of, okay, mental health is important, I need to do something about it in my company, so let me find some resources. And then we either explicitly or implicitly say, well, we don't have time to deal with mental health, but you're welcome to go on your own time and go to this EAP or go to this app or go to whatever we've talked about. So on that subject, how can we make sure it's part of our culture and inside our company so that it's talked about, it's safe, and that these resources are a common thing to be used instead of, like I said, well, we're too busy and hopefully you can find time to use these. Does that make sense?
I think it's a lot of it really factors in with being vulnerable and allowing and expressing and encouraging members of leadership to be vulnerable and to share the fact that everyone is struggling with something. There's not a human alive that doesn't have a life that has some level of stress or some outlying factor that could be impacting them. So just think making it real is the first step. The other piece too is really trying to demystify it. We did a lot in an organization I was with previously. I found resources and people to bring in talking about the impact of change on your mind, the impact of how you manage in this new normal. Really trying to help leaders understand just from the perspective of things have changed. That helps to demystify and bring down the walls. And as you talk about how things have changed, talk about the mental health impact, not only on ourselves, but on employees, and use those as opportunities to plant seeds. The other part too, I'm a huge fan of employee resource groups. Utilize employee resource groups as a way to not only help people connect, but within those groups, foster discussions around resources tied to mental health, foster discussions around our own health and well-being, do everything that we can to really tear down the walls around this subject.
I like that. If you would, tell us a bit more about employee resource group in case somebody doesn't know what they are, how to form them, and what they can do.
Sure. So employee resource groups or business affinity groups have really been around for quite some time. I recently actually wrote a bulletin article for Employers Council on this. Really, it's a great opportunity to have employees connect and to allow employees to really find an area or an interest where they connect on a different level. People often think it's just putting groups of, you know, diverse groups together or just a specific group like this. In fact, it's probably one of your best tools to get cross-functional collaboration happening. Pull your teams and find out what's near and dear to their heart. It may be a diverse group. It may be something tied to, emerging business professionals. Maybe you have a lot of younger or millennial employees in your organization who are rising professionals, women. There are so many different ways to connect groups of people together, and within those discussions, help foster discussions around not only the business, but around mental health. It's a great resource. And it's something I can put out a link back to our organization's website that can help provide even more resources for those listening to this podcast.
Sure, thank you. With these employee resource groups, now I'm just going to ask a question that I know many business leaders have asked, and so I just want to hear you address it. They say, okay, mental health's important, that's fine, but we have lots of things to do, and really emotions have no place in work. So why would I allow people to talk about mental health, especially in an employee resource group where maybe it's not, monitored, right? And I don't know what they're talking about or what time they're wasting. I mean, how can I be okay with that?
Well, I think one of the things in there too, you have to challenge yourself as a leader. How much do you trust your employees? If you think you've given your employees enough freedom, you probably haven't. We shared that quote recently with a team that we worked with from Laszlo, I believe it was Laszlo Brock over at Google. Think about your boundaries and where you can challenge them. If one of them is believing that employees are wasting time discussing mental health, remember, we are whole people. Our minds, our hearts, everything make us whole. It's more than just the work that we do. And to ignore mental health, maybe because it's a subject that you as a leader might be uncomfortable with, really is denying your employees the opportunity to really thrive. There are so many studies out there that show the connection between mental health and engagement at work. People that have a really strong grasp or really strong resources tied to mental health and well-being innovate more. Those are highly productive teams. The statistics are out there that show that this is a subject worth paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Thank you. Now, if I'm going to ask the wrong questions, you can, as your answer, you can say, well, let's ask a different question, right? But here's the question. So with these employee resource groups, so we have it set up, we polled our employees, found their common interests, and we allow them to talk about mental health. Maybe we even give it to them as a subject topic for the day, right? How do you measure whether these employee resource groups are working? How do you know if they're being effective? How do you know if you should continue doing them?
A regular piece should be not only that these groups are communicating with each other, but they're also communicating back their impact to the larger organization. So you designate a representative from each of those employee resource groups to share out. I encourage in either an all staff or a town hall meeting, the progress of these groups and what's happening within them. One of the biggest obstacles to growth can be if you keep those groups siloed. If they only share their information amongst each other, you're doing the organization a disservice. Mm-hmm. So it's really important to not only report out to the larger organization, but also to your leaders, the impact that these groups are having.
I like that. I had another question about that, but it's not coming to me.
It'll come back.
So, one other thing, timing. And these are questions, based on my past experience, but also in case somebody else wondered what I wondered. So with these meetings, how often do they generally happen? And how long do they generally happen? Or is it just, whatever works for your organization, figure it out, see what works?
I think a lot of it needs to be organic. In the beginning, you have to expect, like any team, when you go through what your phase is, what storming, forming, and norming, or forming,
Mhm.
storming, and norming. You need to provide time for people to interact and engage with each other, especially in the beginning, because you're going to be setting guidelines, maybe a charter, maybe a mission statement. There's going to be a lot more interaction at the front half to really ensure that this is a highly performing and very efficient employee resource group. So allow for that time in the beginning, but no, it won't always be the case. As groups again start to go through that norming phase of the process and things are more stabilized, the meetings may be less infrequent, but again, it's going to depend on your organization. Just remember that the time invested in these groups is well spent and can be tied to business results because it's going to lead to greater innovation.
Mm. I like the reminder that if we expect it to work magically and let first or second time, it's not very realistic, right?
No, not at all. Not at all.
Because it's very common to say, oh, I have this idea, employee resource groups, great, we'll have people talk. And then the first meeting, did they come back with a magical solution? No. Well, what the heck? Maybe we should stop, right?
You can't give up that quick. Think about the best ideas and the best laid plans. Oftentimes, they run into loopholes, obstacles, numerous things before they come to fruition for a really amazing idea. Very rarely do you see it come out of the gate, fully formed, packaged, and ready to go.
Right. That's a good reminder. Thank you. So tell us a bit more about what you currently do in your position.
So I am an HR consultant with Employers Council. We really are tied with creating exceptional workplaces for our members. So we offer a variety of services, everything from HR and legal advice. We create custom surveys for our employees, or our employers, I should say. We help them with information regarding background checks. I mean, any number of services that you can find under the employment law umbrella, including workplace investigations, our organization is providing.
Awesome. What is your organization doing, if anything, with mental health? I mean, do you give resources to the companies? You can actually, I'd love to hear both sides. What do you do internally, and what are you doing with your consulting companies?
I think the beautiful part that we're doing internally that I'm really proud of is really creating work life. I won't call it balance, but harmony. That is a huge key to mental health. They make it a regular practice at Employers Council for us to work a less than 40-hour work week. This is standard within our culture and has been an established norm. So we take breaks every day for lunch where you are relieved completely of any duties, responsibilities, and you're also encouraged at a set time at the end of the day to log off, disconnect, and be with your family. On Fridays, we leave, and we're given the opportunity to leave even earlier than your standard workday to again allow for that time to reconnect. What I love with this organization is that we really foster a mentality around flexibility and helping our employees have cohesive process. Work is only one part of our life. It is not our entire life. That is a huge, huge component. The other piece too is we really foster and not only try to walk the talk, but live the talk for our members. We provide mental health days to our staff and our employees to ensure that we have the time to rest and recharge as we need to. We also try to provide connection. We are all in a remote environment. My division specifically meets once a month. We pick a coffee house or a brewery, that's our team's thing, somewhere in the local area just to connect and just sit and speak with each other, see each other face to face, foster that in-person connection, but also just a reminder that we're a really strong and cohesive team. I'm very fortunate. I work with some amazing practitioners who just are really genuinely good people, and we love to foster our communication and connection with each other. Those are all good components of mental health. We have a place of trust within our workplace. We trust each other. We are open. We share ideas and thoughts. Nothing is discouraged or kicked down as like, where did you come up with that idea from? All of those things are keys within good mental health as well to really help provide an environment to grow. And we encourage the same for our members. We work with small organizations, we work with large size organizations, but we encourage so much of communication, build trust, I talk with other HR practitioners about their own self-care routines. Are you taking care of yourself? Are you taking time away from the work? Are you filling up your own tank to ensure that you can help take care of others?
Oh, goodness, you shared some awesome things right there. Thank you. It's almost to the point where it's like, wow, you just shared all these solutions. If somebody takes the time and says, you know what, we should do that, wow, it'd be so different.
I know, world would be a whole different place if we all prioritize this.
No kidding. So many things that I really loved, but I'm going to touch on one that you said at the end, where you actually ask the other HR practitioners if they are doing their own self-care, which I think is fantastic. I think we mentioned at the beginning of our conversation that a lot of times HR is so busy helping others that we don't take time to take care of ourselves. And so I love that you bring that up with your HR practitioner. So I'd love to hear how that's going. Is it, I mean, do they experience feelings of guilt? Like, oh, I can't take the time to take care of myself because I have so many other people to take care of. Or just tell me about that.
You hit the nail on the head. What we see right now, and I think it's important to really amplify, is that HR has always worn a lot of hats, right? This role has taken on so much more depth through the pandemic. Now we are looking at, concerns tied to vaccines. We're looking at employees who may be struggling with their own mental health. So now we've become coaches, we've become counselors on a whole different level. And then we're working to be strategic in this environment as well. Pivot, help our organizations, either experience even more growth post-pandemic or rebound from losses that they may have felt last year financially. There is a lot tagged to HR right now. And oftentimes with practitioners, it's really just having the first discussion. Some honestly don't even know what self-care entails. Sometimes people think, well, I don't work on the weekend. That's self-care. Well, it's a really good start and it's a hugely important part of the process, but self-care is so much more than that. What do you do for your own well-being? I love our organization offers classes on leadership through mindfulness. How often do you hear about being a mindful leader? The term gets thrown around, but it's kind of like, what are you talking about? The importance of just taking a breath during the day, what breathing can do for you, what stepping away from your work can do. A lot of HR practitioners feel so overwhelmed and don't even see the ability that they can form in their own lives just by setting boundaries to not allow every aspect of work to hit them as heavily. And it's a process, right? I know even for myself, setting boundaries, prioritizing self-care, not even just exercising, breathing, yoga. There's so many things out there that can really help you tap in to stronger mental health. And oftentimes a lot of these resources don't even have a cost attached to them.
Mm-hmm. So if you could give us a little bit of advice, and I imagine from your personal experience, how can one who is not used to taking care of themselves, either from, oh, I don't even know where to start, I don't know what it is, just coming from where that is, and they have that feeling of guilt, how can they say, okay, Jade, I love what you're saying, I think it's all fantastic, but it's not for me, because how can you help them get started?
Well, it really is for everyone. And the best thing to start where you are today. For some people, and I'll give you an example of my own journey. I've worked in organizations where I've been in the office all day and felt like I couldn't get up for 3 minutes from my desk to do anything. Well, that took a priority shift for me. And I had to look at, are there ways to carve out either before, after, or in the middle of my day time to just take a walk? That was a good start there. Cycling is another activity that I got involved and introduced to that really helped me find another form of mental clarity. The other part too, there are numerous apps, as I alluded to earlier, things from 365 gratitude to the Calm app to any of number of things where maybe it just starts with you taking a few minutes to do mindful breathing and journal about the stress that you're feeling in the day. Give yourself a space to not only let that out of your mind and heart, but remind yourself that you're human. Practice the same compassion that you give to others to yourself. There are so many different tools. Taking 10 minutes, find an app on YouTube, take 10 minutes a night or in the morning to do some form of yoga or restorative yoga or breathing exercises. We have so many resources. As I mentioned, Ben, it's amazing, that people often don't even think about. There's, yoga studios in almost every city, state, and town. Some, I think we had one locally in Colorado Springs. I'm not sure if they're still in existence or not, that was doing yoga on a donation basis. So people could come even if they didn't have money and they would donate what they were able to give. There's so many different places to start. The key is just start where you're at, challenge yourself, write a goal. This is my goal for the week. If you don't achieve your goal, that's okay. That's what the next week is for. But continuously come back to yourself and remind yourself that I have to make this a practice.
Well done. My goodness. You say things very well, very helpful, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, Ben.
So thanks again for joining this episode today, Jade. Your advice has been very helpful, very specific, and your advice of starting where you are, and then these little things that if we try one and try it small, then we can start to see that progress and we can start to become more comfortable with it, can make a huge difference, not only in our own lives, but in the lives of the organizations in which we work. I think that's fantastic. So thank you.